Hello there, everybody. I'm Ken Jack from Lights Camera Barstool, and today I'm going to tell you some of the best movies and shows coming and going from streaming in the month of July. Let's start out with Netflix, which has a brand new trilogy coming this month, the Fear Street trilogy, which is based off the book series of the same name from R.L. Stine. It's a bunch of slashers that are all connected through 3 different movies, which are all based in 3 different time periods. Part 1, 1994, comes out on July 2nd. Part 2, 1978, comes out on July 9th. And Part 3, 1666, comes out on July 16th. There's not many genres that refresh the movie palette quite like slashers do, and I think that getting all 3 movies within a few days is just a really cool idea. Very excited for this. Next is T2 Judgment Day, which comes to Netflix on July 1st. I mean, James Cameron is just the sequel king. Between Aliens and T2, they're 2 of the best sequels ever made, period. T2, I think, arguably better, maybe even than the first Terminator. The action is insane. I mean, I think it's one of those just sort of sci-fi action movies that really just grips you from start to finish, and I love that about T2. Plus, okay, I'm gonna try and green screen this. Ready? Pretend I'm grabbing the chain link fence. Next is Django Unchained, which comes to Netflix on July 24th. The only pitch I should have to give you if you somehow have never seen Django Unchained before is it's Quentin Tarantino directing Jamie Foxx, directing Christoph Waltz. It is fucking Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio was the 3rd person that came to mind with this. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson as well. Incredible cast, great dialogue, and a phenomenal story. And it's always worth a rewatch, you know? The dialogue that Tarantino scripts up is always just top fucking tier. Let's do a couple series, starting with I Think You Should Leave Season 2, which comes to Netflix on July 6th. If you're not familiar with the first season, it's essentially very short, like 15-minute long episodes of skit comedy. And as someone who hasn't really connected with skit comedy in a long time, I loved this show. Tim Robinson, if you're not familiar, he used to write for SNL. And this show essentially is comprised of like a bunch of skits he wrote for SNL, but they wouldn't air. The skits probably hit to me on like a 50 to 75% clip, but the ones that hit are hysterical. Very memorable ones that like I just want to repeat. Like, you know, like back in the day, you used to be like in high school or middle school, whatever, you'd be like the my wife guy. Like, that's me with Tim Robinson. I just quote their skits nonstop. Season 2 added some big names like Paul Walter Hauser and Bob Odenkirk and more, and I can't wait. Next is Masters of the Universe Revelation, which comes to Netflix on July 23rd. This is a revival of the classic animated series, and it comes from Kevin Smith, someone who is very passionate about Masters of the Universe. As someone who wasn't really into Masters of the Universe, I'm very excited to watch it, not just because I know Kevin Smith's at the wheel, but it has a monster cast. I mean, Mark Hamill, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Lena Headey, Alicia Silverstone, Stephen Root, Kevin Conroy, Justin Long, Tony Todd, and so much more. It's a huge cast. All right, fine, hit the music.
And so I cried sometimes when I'm lying in bed.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
Oh, I am enjoying this scene.
Get on with it!
And really quick, let me give you some movies that are leaving Netflix so you can watch them before they go. The entire Back to the Future trilogy is leaving Netflix on July 1st. I don't like the second 2 nearly as much as the first, but I mean, the first Back to the Future movie, one of the most iconic sci-fi movies ever made, period, and it is a must-watch for, I think, just cinephiles in general. Scarface is also leaving Netflix on July 1st.
Say hello to my little friend!
Much like Back to the Future, I think one of those iconic sort of must-watch movies, regardless of if you think it's good or bad, it's something you have to watch. It's one of the most just big and influential crime movies ever made. Spotlight is leaving Netflix on July 31st. Spotlight, obviously a big Oscar darling. I mean, it won Best Picture, Best Screenplay. And as far as screenplay goes, it's definitely, I think, one of the better scripted movies in recent memory. And definitely just a dramatic story and a true story that is well worth watching. Let's move over to HBO Max, and we'll start off with Space Jam: A New Legacy, which comes to the streaming service on July 16th. I've talked about this with Space Jam before, but I think the thing to remember with the original is it wasn't an overly good movie. It's just a movie where they combined an extremely popular property with the Looney Tunes, and they combined that with one of the most popular stars in the world, and Michael Jordan, put them together and make money off that. It worked, and I think a lot of us are nostalgic for it in that way, and I think that a lot of us that are so nostalgic for that first one probably aren't going to like this one, but I think kids that want to watch this the same age that we watched the first one are really going to like this. It stars LeBron, Don Cheadle, Zendaya, Lil Howery, Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, a bunch of other NBA players who will be making cameos. And it's been confirmed that Michael Jordan will be making an appearance. I'm not going to make this prediction too early, but can you imagine if the movie just ends on like, Michael Jordan and LeBron about to just have a one-on-one? Like the famous debate no one will ever shut the fuck up about. Next up is Freaky, which comes to HBO Max on July 24th. Freaky is like a body swap comedy horror movie. It stars Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton. It is one of the most surprisingly good movies from last year. Like it blew me away. I was so entertained by that movie, and I didn't think it was going to be good going into it. I'd say if you like movies like Happy Death Day, then this would be right up your alley. Next up is Reservoir Dogs, which is coming on July 1st. Reservoir Dogs is one of the early Tarantino works. It has still a very, very high profile cast, I would say, maybe just in retrospect. Very, very well scripted. I think it is one of the just better small setting movies you'll ever watch. Tarantino was also recently on Bill Maher, and he said something to the effect that he wanted to he thought about remaking Reservoir Dogs and then dismissed it later on, which is probably the right move. Also, let's watch this TikTok of Tarantino really quick.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, darling.
Good. Do you mind signing my foot, actually?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Cool.
What do you think of it, by the way? Can you read it?
No, can I read it?
I'd rate it.
Oh, rate? Oh, no, I wouldn't rate it. But it would be at the top.
Let your freak flag fly, brother. Let's get to some movies that are leaving HBO Max, starting with In the Heights, which leaves on July 11th. So as I'm sure you know, In the Heights had a simultaneous release, which means that they just get a 30-day window, which they air, and then it's going to be going off streaming, and then it'll probably come back to HBO Max within probably 3 months or something like that. In the Heights is very colorful, very vibrant. I really like the way that they put all these settings together. I think the star of it obviously the star is Anthony Ramos, but he's the one that I think blew me away more than anyone else. It definitely could have used, I think, maybe a better supporting cast, but Anthony Ramos is unbelievable in that movie. Next is Argo, which leaves on July 31st. Another Oscar darling, and this time it's directed by Ben Affleck and starring him as well. A true story. I think it's extremely well put together as far as, making sure you feel the actual suspense of the moment, even though you got to know what happens. I mean, even if you start the movie not Wikipediaing it, you probably, wiki summaried it at some point and you still feel that sort of level of suspense that everyone else in that situation is feeling. And lastly, Kung Fu Hustle is leaving HBO Max on July 31st. I rant and rave about this movie all the time because it is one of my favorite all-time foreign movies ever made, especially among comedies. I think it's definitely near the top because it is hysterical. It crosses, I think, the borders of comedy very, very easily. Super easy to watch. Fun plot, and I think really, really funny characters. Let's move on to Hulu and start out with Caddyshack, which is coming to the service on July 1st. Caddyshack is one of the most influential and iconic comedies ever made. Another one, I think, among the ranks of the other ones I've mentioned earlier. It's a movie, if you want to consider yourself a cinephile, you have to watch it. It's a super, super funny cast, and I think that the comedy is held up really well. A lot of comedies made around that era, sometimes it doesn't totally translate, but I think that it is all of their core concepts, like their conceptual humor, it very much holds up well. Let's move on to Fargo, which comes to the service on July 1st. Not only is Fargo one of the better black comedies ever made, but it also inspired what I would consider one of my favorite shows over the last few years, which is Fargo, the show. As is, I think, per usual with the Coen brothers, there's really good characters and incredible dialogue and just very, very funny and also tense moments. Lastly, Leave No Trace leaves on July 4th. Leave No Trace is like a really intimate story set in the Pacific Northwest. It's about a father and a daughter that live out in the wilderness and they don't want to be part of the society, but the daughter does, and it's really, really good. Ben Foster I think it's my favorite role of his, maybe second to Hell or High Water, and this is a movie that put Thomasin McKenzie on the map for me. She's obviously gone on to do Jojo Rabbit, among many other things. It's a movie that I think really blew me away because I didn't know what to expect going into it at all, other than I really like Ben Foster, but it became one of my favorite movies of that year. Let's talk about some movies that are leaving Hulu, starting out with Warrior on July 4th. It's one of the best sport movies, one of the best fight movies ever made. Just the chemistry between that entire cast is fantastic. Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy might not look anything alike, but I think their fighting sequences and their individual characterization it's off the charts. Next is Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is leaving on July 31st. This is like a really interesting documentary about a guy that's been perfecting the art of making sushi his entire life, and I think it's something where I can't confidently say that I've ever met someone who is like a true master at what they do, or even really observed it and if that makes sense. But watching him and the way he talks, breathes, lives, everything in his life is absorbed with this one topic that he's an expert at. It was really it's fascinating. And lastly, Predator is leaving Hulu on July 31st. One of my favorite sci-fi action movies ever made. great characters, awesome one-liners, and really cool just like practical gunplay. They just fucking obliterate a forest in the middle of the movie for no reason. Let's move on to Prime Video and start out with Patton, which comes on July 1st. Patton is one of my favorite older movies, stars George C. Scott among other people as George Patton, the very famous World War II general. I think it's not only extremely well acted, and that's not just me saying that, he won the Oscar for it, and he also refused to collect the Oscar for it. He called it he said the Oscars are like a 2-hour meat parade, and he's like, yeah, I'm not showing up, fuck you guys. It's definitely one of the better World War II movies you'll ever watch, and I think it's very, it'll get your patriotic juices flowing for July 4th. Let's move to some movies that are leaving Prime Video, starting out with Man on a Wire, which leaves on July 1st. Man on a Wire is probably one of the better documentaries of the last 20 years. Chronicles this, I guess you would call him like an adrenaline junkie. He does like a high wire walk across the Twin Towers. It's fascinating to watch. I mean, just the whole, I think, build around, like the build up to momentum to the actual moment happening, and this is like 1974, it's incredible. It's very, very scary, I would say, especially for me. Like, even thinking about heights right now, my hands are getting sweaty. Next is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, which is also leaving on July 1st. I think this movie kind of falls in that freaky zone like we were talking about earlier, where it's comedy horror, and if you like that genre, you will love this movie. Plus, former LCB interviewee Alan Tudyk cuts a rug in this movie. And lastly, also on July 1st, Team America World Police is leaving. That movie is what Trey Parker and Matt Stone do best. You know, it's offensive, it's crude, it's loud, but you know, it's pretty damn funny. Lastly, let's move on to Disney Plus, which has The Sandlot coming on July 2nd. The Sandlot, one of the great sports movies, one of the great coming of age movies, one of the great summer movies. It hits every mark you could really want out of it. Next, on July 9th, Black Widow is coming. That sounded gross. Phrasing is bad there. This comes from an Australian director, Kate Shortland, who has done 3 smaller movies previous to this, all of which got, you know, I would say above average reception. It's written by Eric Pearson, who also wrote Thor Ragnarok. He wrote Godzilla vs. Kong. He did rewrites on Infinity War, Endgame, Ant-Man, Homecoming. He's a guy that knows his shit. It's obviously a monster cast, which I'm sure you know if you've paid attention to any of the marketing blitz that's gone on for the last like year plus that's been delayed. Obviously ScarJo in the main role, Florence Pugh, Rachel Weisz, David Harbour, Ray Winstone, so many more, and also Lauren Balfe on the track. And this is a guy where I really, really like his work. Beyond doing like a bunch of video games I really like Assassin's Creed soundtracks, he also did the Mission Impossible Fallout soundtrack, which was insanely good. And lastly, Jungle Cruise is coming on July 30th. I'll be completely frank with you guys right now. Never been on the ride, don't know what to expect from it really, but I think that this movie is going to be ass. Don't ask me to really explain why, other than every trailer I see, I get the more sinking feeling that this movie is just going to be complete ass cheeks. And you know, maybe it'll be a good kids movie, which is what Disney obviously does very well, but I'm not excited for this movie. But just letting you know, maybe you'll be pumped up. It's The Rock, it's Emily Blunt, who knows? So since Disney Plus doesn't really tell us what's leaving, that's gonna be it for this episode. But make sure to check the link in the description. I have a link to the blog, which is gonna have a big consolidated list of all of the movies coming and going from all of these streaming platforms. Make sure to go to movierankings.net to find out what to watch and where to watch it. We have over 5,000 titles with both me and Jeff's scores on it. Check it out. And make sure to like and subscribe and all of that fun stuff. I'm Ken Jack. See you next time.